Right. Let's talk about the deep state. The term itself sounds like it was cooked up in a writer's room for a spy thriller that went straight to streaming. You picture shadowy figures in smoke-filled rooms, stroking white cats and deciding the fate of nations. And yes, some politicians, particularly in the United States, have milked this idea for all it's worth. A PAC supporting Donald Trump, for instance, recently sent out fundraising emails promising donors unfiltered updates on deep state sabotage, which is a fantastic way to turn vague paranoia into cold, hard cash. It's a compelling story, a simple narrative of good versus evil. The plucky, elected outsider against a sinister, hidden cabal. It's certainly more exciting than the truth. The reality, and I know this is disappointing, is far more boring. The deep state isn't a secret society. It's the vast, sprawling machinery of government itself. It's the millions of non-political, professional civil servants who keep the country running day in and day out, long after the politicians who hired some of them have retired to write their memoirs. These are the people who manage air traffic control, inspect our food, process our tax returns, and analyze foreign intelligence. They are the institutional memory of the state. They were there before the current president, and they'll be there long after, which, depending on your view, is either deeply reassuring or deeply frustrating. Think of it less as a conspiracy and more as institutional inertia. Government is a colossal oil tanker, not a speedboat. It's designed to be stable and slow to change, which prevents it from being jerked around by the political whims of every new administration. These career professionals, the so-called unelected bureaucrats, are the ones who actually know how the incredibly complex systems of government work. They understand the thousands of pages of regulations, the historical context of foreign treaties, and the logistical nightmares involved in, say, distributing a new vaccine. They are the permanent staff, and they've seen it all before. This creates a natural tension. On one side, you have the democratic mandate of elected leaders who arrive in Washington or London or Jerusalem with a mandate for change. On the other, you have a permanent class of experts whose entire job is based on maintaining the existing systems and procedures that prevent the whole thing from collapsing. This isn't necessarily a battle of good versus evil. It's a fundamental conflict between the desire for radical, rapid change and the need for functional, predictable stability. And when these two forces collide, as they often do, the fireworks can be spectacular. Every election cycle, it's the same glorious song and dance. A charismatic candidate stands at a podium, bathed in flattering light, and makes a series of magnificent promises. "We will slash spending," they declare. "We will overhaul the tax code overnight. We will give every citizen a tariff rebate check," a Trump-aligned PAC actually promised. These pledges sound fantastic on the campaign trail, and they get people excited. The problem is, they often have the same relationship with reality as a cat has with obeying a command. The candidate arrives for their first day in office, ready to flip the whole table over, only to discover the table is bolted to the floor with 1,000 arcane bolts. The simple, unsexy truth is that a new leader has remarkably little wiggle room. Most of the national budget is already spoken for. It's locked into mandatory spending programs like Social Security, Medicare, and interest payments on the national debt. These are not things you can just decide to stop paying for, unless you want to see riots in the streets led by angry grandparents. The discretionary part of the budget, the bit that Congress actually gets to argue over each year, is a surprisingly small slice of the overall pie. So that grand promise to reinvent government often ends up being a squabble over a few percentage points of funding for the National Park Service. This is where our elected hero runs headfirst into the so-called deep state. They want to enact a bold new policy, but a senior civil servant from the Treasury Department pops up with a 300-page report explaining how it violates 3 international trade agreements and 17 sections of the United States Code. They want to deregulate an industry, and an analyst from the EPA calmly presents data showing the catastrophic environmental impact it would have. This isn't necessarily sabotage, as some would have you believe. It's the system's immune response, with the experts pointing out the very real, very boring, and very complicated consequences of a simple-sounding idea. This dynamic is playing out vividly in Israel right now. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's government, elected with a clear mandate, tried to push through major judicial reforms. But they faced massive resistance from what many there call their own deep state: the judiciary, the security establishment, and the bureaucracy. Netanyahu has even publicly accused them of thwarting his government's will. This isn't just a theoretical debate. It has led to mass protests and a constitutional crisis. It's a perfect real-world example of an elected leader finding that winning an election is not the same as being able to steer the ship of state wherever you please. Let's try a metaphor. Imagine the government is a patient on an operating table, undergoing an incredibly complex surgery. The patient is, let's say, the national economy or the healthcare system. Now, every few years, we hold an election to choose who gets to be in the operating room. The person we elect is often chosen because they are charming, have a great smile, and give a fantastic speech about how they're going to perform the most amazing surgery ever. They are, for all intents and purposes, an amateur who won a popularity contest. They have no medical training, but they have a lot of confidence. Now, surrounding that amateur are the surgeons, the career civil servants, the economists, the diplomats, the generals. These are the people who have spent their entire lives studying the patient. They know every vein, every organ, every potential complication. When the newly elected amateur cheerfully announces, "I think we should start by removing the heart," I read on the internet it's a good idea. It's the surgeons who have to step in and say, "With all due respect, sir, that would kill the patient." The procedure requires us to work on the liver first, and here are the 47 steps we need to follow to do it safely. This is the protective function of bureaucracy. It's a check on amateurism. These experts, these unelected surgeons, provide the stability and competence that prevents a charismatic but clueless leader from causing irreversible damage. Their job is to ensure continuity. For example, when the United States found itself at war with Iran in early 2026, it wasn't the politicians who managed the incredibly complex logistics of deploying troops, securing supply lines, and coordinating with allies. It was the Pentagon's permanent military and civilian staff, the same people who were doing it a year ago and will be doing it a year from now, regardless of who is in the White House. This structure is, by its very nature, anti-democratic in the purest sense. We didn't vote for the head of the Federal Reserve's Research Division or the State Department's top expert on Southeast Asia. Yet these people wield immense influence by providing the information and analysis upon which decisions are made. They are the guardrails on the highway of governance. They can't steer the car, but they can, and often do, prevent the driver from swerving into a ditch at 100 miles per hour. And frankly, looking at some of the drivers we've elected, we should probably be sending those guardrails a thank you card. So, what happens when the amateur in the operating room decides to ignore the surgeons? What happens when a leader, convinced of their own genius and egged on by their supporters, starts firing the experts and trying to perform the surgery themselves? The answer is, quite simply, chaos. You get decisions based on gut feelings rather than data, policies driven by ideology instead of evidence, and a government that stumbles from one self-inflicted crisis to another. It's like letting a toddler fly a commercial airliner because he really wants to. It might be fun for a minute, but a crash is inevitable. We've seen glimpses of this across the world. In Israel, critics of Netanyahu argued that his government's focus on its political battle with the judiciary and security establishment in 2023 created internal divisions and distractions that may have contributed to the catastrophic intelligence failure before the October 7th Hamas attack. When you're busy fighting the people who are supposed to be watching the walls, you're less likely to see the enemy coming. The desire to dismantle the deep state can leave a nation dangerously vulnerable, both from within and from without. Elsewhere, the very idea of a deep state can be used to justify profoundly undemocratic actions. Look at Bangladesh, where it was revealed on March 26, 2026, that powerful institutions had offered to extend the tenure of an interim government until 2029, effectively canceling elections. The plan involved using the courts to sideline major political parties. Thankfully, the offer was rejected, but it shows how the concept of a hidden, powerful elite can be a real and present danger to democracy itself, not just a fundraising buzzword. It's the terrifying logical endpoint of believing that an unelected few know better than the voters. Ultimately, this leaves us with a deeply uncomfortable question. We live in a democracy, and the will of the people, expressed through elections, is supposed to be paramount. But the systems that keep our society functioning, from our economy to our national security, are mind-bogglingly complex. Running them requires an immense amount of specialized knowledge and experience. So, who do you really want in charge of the machinery? The charismatic amateur you voted for, who promises a revolution but doesn't know which button does what? Or the unelected surgeon who may not share your political views but knows how to keep the patient alive?